Welcome to Entrepreneur Money Stories.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Danielle. I'm really excited to talk today.
Yeah, we're going to totally jam out. We have a ton of alignments. So let's jump right in. Tell the audience just a little bit about yourself and maybe one fun fact that you've never shared on another show.
So my name is Tanessa Shears. I'm a health consultant and I work with 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs to help them double their energy and focus so that they can get some more of their time back and also feel better than they have in years. And just generally that looks like making more money in our businesses. So that's me in a nutshell. Something fun. Oh my goodness. Let's see. I would say something maybe fun is I have this interesting thing where I remember almost everything that I hear. And so it works really well in the business I'm in. Yeah, with a lot of things to do. Like, honestly, one of my favorite podcasts is the Huberman Lab podcast. It's a neuroscience podcast. And those are like 3-hour podcasts. And I'm like, great. I hear this once, it's in there. And I feel like it's really useful in my business because I can like jam on a lot of topics based on stuff I've heard, which is, I think it's fun.
That is very useful. Have you seen the show Suits?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what that reminds me of. He had the memory for to be able to remember everything. I'm like, I need that in my life.
I almost credit a lot of that to good sleep. That's something that has really come on in the last 5 or 6 years. And I think maybe I started tapping into it in university because I was like, I can see all the notes in my head and I can just regurgitate them onto the page. So I'm almost wondering if it's because that's when I started really keying into my sleep. If it made such a difference. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. I think it might be something you either have or you don't. My brother, he can read an entire book and regurgitate the whole thing back to you. All right, I digress. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I think it's really fun to start with that fun fact. I want to talk a little bit about business owners. We are so passionate about our business and our craft, right? We created this second child, if you will, and we tend to get put on the back burner. And I hear a lot of clients say that, words like burnout, and I don't think it's all necessarily our energy in our business, but how we're caring for ourselves and in turn our brains. Can you tell me a little bit about when you work with your clients, how are you helping them kind of get this return on investment of caring for themselves, putting themselves at a priority?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing comes from breaking that belief that taking time for you is a detriment to the productive time that you have in your business. Like so many of us are like, I don't have time to do that. But what we're not recognizing is when your brain is not functioning optimally. And what I mean by that is like, you're finding you're distracted easy, you're foggy, you can't think clearly, you're forgetting things. It takes you forever to get something done. You're staring at the screen blank, can't come up with anything creative to say. All of that time that you are losing in your business is direct productive time lost. And it is because our brains aren't being cared for. And that can include a whole bunch of things, like can be how well we're resting at night. It can be, are we moving? Are we getting up out of our chairs during the day? It could be what we're eating. So I think the biggest thing comes down to like really breaking this belief of like, your brain is the best asset your business has, and it will give you the greatest return on investment when taken care of and used appropriately. And so I think once we can start breaking that belief and it's like, oh, well, if my brain is down here operating at 60% capacity, if we can get you up to 90%, what are we getting done in our days? How are we feeling when we're done work? Do we have the energy to live the life we want to live, or are we just crashing out and zoning out because that's all we have the energy to do?
Wow. I've never heard or thought of it that way. Your brain is the best asset your business has. So forget the balance sheet, folks. We're throwing out the balance sheet, and our brain is going to be our new scorecard to measure our assets. So I think it's hard as business owners, right? When we talk on the show, we can give very specific strategies. Here's how you increase profit. Here's how you build a healthy balance sheet. Here's how you put money in a savings account so you can increase your assets. Here's how you reduce your liability, right? Those are all very clear strategies that have clear results. How the heck do we build this type of asset? Like, what do we need to do to start building that asset?
if we're talking money, the way we know whether it's getting better or worse is what do? We measure it, right? You're seeing like, is the bank account going up or down? One of the things that I heavily enforce with my clients is I send them all Aura rings. Do you know what an Aura ring is? Have you heard of them?
So I have an Aura ring and a Whoop. And yeah, I defaulted back to my Whoop and I took the Aura ring off. But yes, I am obsessed.
Yeah.
I'm sure the audience has heard me talk about the Whoop before, but please tell them all about it because it is a great tool.
Yeah. So whether it is an Aura ring, whether it is a Whoop, whatever it is monitoring and tracking. Is what I am doing having a positive ROI? Like, am I seeing not only my like body stress score, that's your heart rate variability. Am I seeing stability and improvement in that? Am I seeing that I'm getting enough sleep? Am I seeing that I am getting enough activity? So finding ways to measure that and quantify that and say, oh, okay, I'm on the right track or not. Because one of the things that I think is hallmark of entrepreneurs is this thing that my sleep is fine. I'm good. Trust me, I'm in bed from 11 to 6 every night. It's enough time. But there's so many things that until you actually have that data, you don't even think about. Like most people don't know that the average entrepreneur, and I've looked at a lot of data, is awake between 60 and 90 minutes every night. Some of those they know about, some of them they don't. And so now all of a sudden, what if you're only cracking 6 hours of sleep? Like there's no way that your brain is going to be able to perform at its, prime potential, even if we think we are getting enough sleep. So I just love to have actual data to base everything off of instead of winging it.
I love that because we talk about KPIs all the time, right? We have key performance indicators to measure our businesses. So having a Whoop or a ring gives us our own internal KPI, key performance indicator, to measure our own bodies. What the heck happens when I'm sleeping, right? Like why you're encouraging us to sleep to build the brain. But I think as business owners and just intellectual people, it always helps us to understand the why behind it and click to it. So why do we want sleep? Like, how is that helping?
I think it partly understands what's going on while you're asleep. So at the beginning of our night, we get the majority of what's called deep sleep. And that's where we are physically restored. Like your brain is physically restored from all the thinking, memories are formed. And that's where you're actually getting the benefits of the things like your workout, meaning this is where you grow from the workout. It's during this. So we definitely want that. If you've ever had one of those mornings where you woke up and you felt physically like exhausted, hit by a truck, you probably didn't get the recovery that came with deep sleep. But REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, when we dream, this is what I call entrepreneurial gold. And I protect my REM sleep, something fierce. And the reason for that is when you have enough REM sleep, your creativity is improved and your ability to problem solve and think outside the box. As entrepreneurs, our businesses revolve around the size and the quality of the problem we solve. So if I want to be constantly thinking of innovative ways to communicate and create content and help my clients, my business is going to grow a lot faster than if we're using the same ideas we used 5 years ago. On top of that, when you get enough REM sleep, you're able to manage your mood. So think about those nights when you didn't get that great of a sleep and you wake up and you feel a little irritable, a little sassy. Maybe you're just a little cranky during the day. Like, for me, if somebody shows up in my inbox, like someone that's not that pleasant on Instagram, or you get a client that's panicked about something, I want to be able to be cool and I want to be able to respond in integrity. And I don't want to feel stressed out or overwhelmed or like I spiral out because I got an email that set me off or something threw off my schedule. So my ability to manage my mood. And I think the most important part about REM sleep is you are able to read facial expressions and body gestures better. Why does this matter? If you are a coach, if you are a consultant, if you are a CEO with a team, I want to know that when I'm talking that it's making sense. And I'm watching for in my clients' faces, like, are they leaning in? Are they nodding? Are they leaning back? Do they look confused? Do I need to explain this another way? Am I connecting on this point? And if you have that ability, you're going to be a way better coach. You are going to be a way better CEO in your business. So with those things in mind, it's like sleep is not just what you do to pass your time to the next day. It's like you are setting your brain up to function optimally in your business the next day.
So forget the hustle culture. Gone are the days that I'm going to work through the night so that I can get more done. and we're going to make sure that we get enough sleep so that we can get more done. So we're actually just flipping the hustle culture on its head and changing the story. How do we actually get good sleep? I'm thinking bedtime routine, there's all this noise about gurus talking about morning routine. And I think morning routine is important, but talk to us a little bit about bedtime routine. No, guys, it's not like putting your kids to sleep, but we need to put ourselves to sleep. So how can we do that so we can optimize our sleep?
Yeah. So if we're talking about wind down routines, this is the analogy I love that I feel really makes it click. Now, imagine that you're on the freeway and you're driving at full speed, right? Naturally, what happens? You get off on the off ramp, and then you get on the local highways, and then you're in your residential neighborhood, and then you're in your driveway, and then you park your car. What happens? Your speed is slowing down with each of those progressions, right? We are on the freeway with our brain, meaning our brains are functioning as human doings. We're responding to meetings, getting dinner ready, taking care of the kids. We're all of the things we're doing in our business. We need to proactively think about this deceleration of brain activity. And I think what we like to do as entrepreneurs is we're on the freeway and your garage is at the end of the freeway and you just better hope you can stop. And it's just a visual that really makes it like, oh, so when I'm like, my brain is active and fully engaged and I'm reading and I've got a business book and my highlighters are out, or even if you're just ruminating on something, you get to the end of that highway and you're just finding you're not going to be able to get to sleep that well. So this keeps your cortisol high. You have trouble falling asleep and you have trouble staying asleep. So what I like to look for are not only things you can do in your evening that gear you down, but ways you can trigger your brain to gear down. Because there's something called a circadian rhythm, and that is your body, how it's governed with a 24-hour clock. And think of things like this. Your body temperature goes up and down at certain times of the day. So do your hormones, so do your blood pressure, all of the things. Now, when you are in your evening, one of the most powerful communicators of wind down is light. Now, come back to before we were indoors with all this electricity. When it was nighttime, what happens? Sun goes down, gets orange and pink, low in the sky, nice and dim. Our brain goes, great, bedtime. Let's start producing some melatonin. Let's get ready for sleep. This is great. But what do? We like to have all of our lights inside the house on, especially in the winter when it's really dark. We stare into our TVs, we stare into our phones, scrolling Instagram right until we go to sleep. And that bright light is actually telling our brain it's the middle of the day. So we turn these devices off and our brains, from the adrenaline of what we've been looking at, the dopamine, our brain is being told with light that it's awake. I like to do what I call like an indoor sunset, meaning like, look at that hour before bed. Can you make it mimic sunset? Can you take the table lamps on instead of the overhead lights? Can you switch out one of your bedside lamps for an orange bulb, which is what we do in our house? And can you make it nice and dim? And with that, you're really telling your brain, okay, quiet down. And that has a lot to do. I mean, we could go over all the activities of like, do you want to breathe? Do you want to read? But those are really intuitive. And I think the ones that we miss are the ones that cue our actual brain and our biology to get ready for good sleep.
Thank you for sharing that. First of all, my family laughs at me because I'm going around turning off the lights, and they think it's an electricity thing because they just think I'm cheap. They think I'm turning on all the lights because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay for it. But it's really because I don't want a lot of lights on as we're starting to cook dinner. We eat dinner late. As we're cooking dinner and winding down, I just don't want to be in these bright lights. So you just gave me my selling story for my family. I'm onto something.
I love it. I love it.
Talk to us a little bit about, I think there's a few other components to this that I've seen in my own journey in food, movement, and alcohol. I think as business owners, we are busy doing mom life. We might be networking. We might be socializing with other business owners. We have a lot of social commitments. How does eating late or not prioritizing movement or those happy hours, all those damn happy hours that we get pulled into as business owners as part of networking, how is that contributing to our sleep? And should we be removing those so that we can become limitless?
Yeah. So let's break that into two components. Let's talk about the exercise and the food because they have a similar effect. So if we rewind back to the part of the conversation where we said that, sleep is meant for allowing our body to physically restore. So if we are exercising and eating within that 2 to 3 hours of bedtime, what happens is your body wants to be winding down, but instead you just gave it a job to do. So with exercise, think about this: your body temperature's up, your heart rate's up, your blood pressure's up. When you go and eat a bunch of food, your blood needs to be diverted to the digestive system, heart rate's up, blood pressure's up, all of that. That is exactly the opposite of what needs to happen for quality sleep. So the more restorative time you get while you are asleep, the better you're going to feel. What that means is the faster your heart rate can drop when you start sleeping, the more time you have to feel amazing tomorrow, that recovery process. When we eat and we exercise within that 3 hours of bed, we basically keep our heart rate elevated. And it's kind of cool. Like if you've ever gotten the opportunity to like watch what your heart rate does while you sleep, if you eat or exercise within those 2 to 3 hours of bed, you'll actually see a small hill where your heart rate actually goes up when you go to sleep instead of down. And that's all time you don't get to spend recovery and in quality sleep. So that's that component there.
I want to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. You're telling me I need to spend a lot of time relaxing. So now I'm not moving at all because I hear people say to me all the time, well, I'm really just not a morning person. I can't believe you go to the gym during the morning. I need to go at night. And so now you just told me I need to really be relaxing at night. So I'm probably just now going to skip the gym and I'm going to relax at home. I'll eat an early dinner to give myself enough time, but I'm not going anywhere. I feel like I just put that on its head. Really good for you.
Yeah, no
Tell me how do we approach
so,
that?
So there's two components I find to exercise. I think one of them is when can you put it that you're actually going to do it? Because you're right. If it's never going to happen, unless it's at that time, maybe that's when you put it and you really see if you can mitigate all the other factors that are disrupting sleep. It's like I have an 11-month-old right now and she's my second baby. And we just went through the whole sleep disruption thing twice. And I know that if something is going to be disrupting my sleep, I can do the best I can to take care of the sleep that I do get. So what you can do is, if you need to exercise late, you look at what kind of things can I do to bring my body calmer faster? And whether that means, you're doing some really slow breathing, you end it with a longer stretch, you take that little bit of time. That's part one. And I think the second part, and I was working with this on a client recently, is like, okay, well, what haven't you considered for where those workouts can go and what they can look like? And one thing he wasn't considering is that 2 days a week, he has an hour in the middle of the afternoon, which would be perfect for working out. Now, it doesn't mean all of his workouts got switched to the afternoon, but where can you find a block or two where you can move one or two of them and start really exploring new ideas? And I feel like that's another approach that you can take if you feel pigeonholed into evenings, is not every day has to look the same. I exercise 2 times a week at 6 a.m. and 2 times a week at 10 a.m. just because that's what works with our schedule right now. It does not have to be the same. So there's options you can explore like that too.
Okay, perfect. I think sometimes we can create new narratives around as we get advice and as we hear content. So I thought it was really important.
Have you heard yourself saying, I'm scared to invest money in my business because what if it doesn't come back? I don't know how much to pay myself, so I won't take a paycheck yet. I'm reinvesting in the business anyway. How about I'm not going to spend any more money until I know exactly where my money is going? Let me tell you, you are not alone. In fact, we have heard all of these stories and more throughout the last 9 years at Kickstart Accounting Inc. And that is why we have created the Money Mindset Mastery Framework to finally unlock and overcome these stories, to finally feel confident in your financial decisions and pay yourself what you deserve. The first step to create a profitable and successful business is to first understand your money mindset. Find out your money mindset personality type by going to kickstartaccountinginc.com/quiz. I can't wait to hear what your money mindset type is.
Okay, let's address alcohol, because this is another one that as I started to network in my business and spend more and more time with other entrepreneurs, I was a little in shock about how much drinking was going on in the entrepreneur space. Let's talk about that. How does that affect our sleep and how does that keep us from being limitless?
Yeah, sure. So alcohol is a super interesting one because it's usually used either, like you said, socially or as like oh my gosh, that was a day. I'm going to cook dinner. I'm going to unwind with a glass of wine, just going to take, the edge off. I'm going to have just that little bit of that exhale on the end of your day. Right. And so we incorporate alcohol, but the problem with alcohol is even though we feel like we're falling asleep, we're actually passing out, because what alcohol does is it sedates the frontal lobe of our brain. So we feel really exhausted, right? And so we fall asleep. But the problem is when that sedation wears off, your brain has trouble staying asleep. And here's the problem with that. If you're looking at that last half of the night and you've woken up from that sedative state and you're having trouble staying asleep, this is where REM sleep is happening. Remember, we talked about REM sleep and all those effects we have as entrepreneurs. One of those specifically being our ability to manage stress. And that is compromised because we are not able to access REM sleep as easily if we have had alcohol. Now, what ends up happening? Your REM sleep is compromised. So you go into the day, everything feels slightly more overwhelming. You feel behind. You probably didn't have that great of a sleep. You're having trouble staying focused. The day feels overwhelming. And then what happens? You get to the end of the day and you go, I'm going to have a glass of wine to wind down. So it kind of ends up being this cycle. So I love the idea of experimenting, meaning what if we just change this for a week and you get to see how you feel? And if you love it, you keep it. If not, you go back. And that's one of those experiments I love to do with alcohol specifically, because I find that at the end of that week, we're feeling a little more in control of our emotions. And I just actually ran through this with a client and she said, I can't believe how often I drink when I don't want to, just because I didn't really recognize how much it was affecting me the next day. So what she now does is she's like, I want to drink on Friday nights with my husband when I'm making dinner, and I want to drink on Saturday when I go out with my friends. But I don't like what it feels like to do the Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday glass of wine with dinner. So it really just lets you zoom out and make choices after you know the difference in feeling well rested, which I think can kind of get a bit mitigated when it's frequent alcohol, so to speak. Like you get to make your choices, but I always like to make them having had both experiences of feeling what it feels like to be rested without alcohol and then with.
So if you were to give a perfect formula, right? Because I think that people want like action steps. A perfect formula, if somebody was to say, I need to make one change, but you guys talked a lot, what's one thing that I should do tomorrow or maybe even today, because I'm a quick start. So what's part of that formula that somebody can start to implement immediately?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact would be having consistent bedtime. So there's this really interesting thing that happens is on the weekend, we like to stay up later. It's just totally natural. A lot of people do it, social events and stuff like that. But the super interesting thing is we give ourselves what's called social jet lag, which literally our social schedule is giving us jet lag. And there have been studies that have showed that it takes up to a whole 24 hours to recover your brain power for every hour you stayed up. So sometimes for some people, it's literally like getting on a plane, hopping time zones on a Friday, coming back on a Sunday. And we wonder just why we drag through the beginning of the week. And then you finally get into your groove midweek and it's the weekend again. So I think the thing that would make the biggest difference for most people is like, can we pick an hour window for a bedtime and an hour window for a wake up time and hold that 7 days a week, with the exception of life happening and events and stuff like that. But sticking to that as often as we can, I think would make the biggest difference.
All right. What's your bedtime?
I have a chronotype. Do you know what a chronotype is?
No.
No, there's a whole field of research that everybody has a gene that dictates if they're a morning person or an evening person. Meaning like, I can't just decide to be a 5 a.m. person. If I'm not genetically like that, I'm always going to feel like I'm struggling. I happen to be one of those. So I am asleep between 8:30 and 9 most nights, but I'm also like this morning up at 4:50 a.m. But that feels really good to me. I have a client and his rhythm is 12 to 8 and he feels amazing. So I think it's really just finding what works best for you when you are most creative, when you feel most well rested. And there's, like I said, that whole field of chronobiology that you can actually look into. There's a really cool book called The Power of When by Dr. Michael Bruce. And he has on his website, I think it's like thepowerofwhenquiz.com. And you can actually take a quiz and it will give you what it thinks is your chronotype. So you can kind of experiment with adjusting your sleep times and see if you feel a little better for it.
Interesting. All right. I'll definitely check that out. We've talked a lot about this as a team recently. on how to kind of optimize everyone's schedules and the way that we work together in the best way. So it's really interesting. How can somebody figure out if, yes, they can read the book, but is there a way for somebody to start to experiment? I think most of us naturally know if we're a morning person or a night person, but is there any other ways that we can think of to start to experiment with figuring out where we should be?
Yeah, I think one of them is if you remove the things that are artificially delaying sleep. And I'm talking about some of those things we talked about, like the exercise, which keeps you alert right before bed, things like the light, which keeps you alert before bed, eating late. If you remove those factors, does your bedtime start to change? And I find that those screens before bed is one thing that keeps our brain awake. So people will say, I don't get tired till 11:30. Well, of course not. We're keeping our brain awake. If you remove those things for a week, does your bedtime shift? The other way you can kind of tell if you're in the right rhythm is if you start waking up around the same time without an alarm clock. Because if you are naturally a 7 a.m. wake up person and you're trying to get up at 5 and you need that alarm clock all the time, it probably might say that like, hey, your body's not waking you up for a reason right now. So I think if you have that schedule flexibility, and a lot of us do as entrepreneurs, how can you lean into that? Like if you were well rested and you didn't need more sleep because you were catching up, like what time would you naturally sleep to? And start going from there. So those are two ways that I look at it.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. Is there anything else that we didn't cover today that we should mention on how business owners can get the best ROI on this asset that we didn't even know we all had?
I think one of the single best things we can do, and we're going to veer a little from the topic of sleep, if that's okay.
Is it okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at breakfast. And I'm not talking about what time you have breakfast, because everyone's a little different, but it's about the consistency of that timing and what you have for breakfast. And the reason for that is one of the big reasons we have so much brain fog is because our blood sugar is very unstable, meaning think about what the common breakfasts are. You have cereal, you have bagels, you have like oatmeal with fruit, you have fruit smoothies, and there's nothing wrong with these things, but they're all pretty dense in carbohydrate. And it's not that carbs are bad either. It's how they affect your blood sugar. Because if you eat a meal that is like 90% carbohydrate, you're going to get a big blood sugar spike. And those frequent spikes come with energy crashes after. So if you're one of those people that like you're starving 2 to 3 hours after breakfast, and what do? We start grabbing at things, snacking at things, even if it's healthy snacks like almonds and grapes, like we're snacky. And if you find you get a really hard energy crash in the afternoon, what I would start looking back is like, okay, if I take my breakfast, how can I make sure that it has protein and or healthy fat in it? Like, can you throw in half an avocado and some eggs, or can you throw in some sausage or some ham or whatever it is? But like, I think if we start looking at like, we're at the beginning of the day, how can we make sure that we are eating foods that are keeping our blood sugar stable and we are satiated? That does so much for your energy stability. And when you are not experiencing that energy crash, you are way more productive.
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
We're really big on this. It's a hash of some kind right now. So it's sweet potatoes with ham, sausage, and scrambled eggs and zucchini. So we eat a lot of that. And then I'll throw like a handful of nuts in there if I'm really feeling like I need a little more fat in there or some more sustainable energy throughout the day. So that's what I had.
Okay, thank you. Does it matter if we're working out in the morning or not that would contribute to a benefit to having higher carbs or higher protein with that breakfast?
Yeah. So the topic on carbohydrates is interesting because I think of it like a fuel gauge. There are some people that eat carbohydrates and their blood sugar spikes up high. They feel really like hungry and everything like that after, and they don't metabolize it well. And there are some people that eat a lot of carbs and have no problem with it at all. And so I think it's finding where you fall on that spectrum. So like you heard in my breakfast, there's sweet potatoes in there. It's not carb free for me. And that works really well. And this was also on a morning where I did a 25-minute walk and I had a 40-minute workout this morning. So I think it's really finding what works for you. And then to finish off that question, your body is definitely able to store a lot more of that carbs in the muscle as kind of like a refuel, as opposed to if you're going in without. So one of the things I kind of like to suggest is I like to titrate in my carbs with how much activity I'm doing. Meaning if I'm really active that day, I'm getting 10, 12,000 steps. If I'm working out, yeah, I'm going to have a really obvious carb source on each of my meals because my body can use it. But if I'm having a day where I'm largely at the desk, I'll probably be a little less judicious with my carbs because I just don't need the energy that day.
Is there a tool as you start to think about how your diet is affecting your brain and your energy? Is there a tool that you can use as a key performance indicator type tool, like we talked about the Whoop and the Aura Ring? Do you suggest anybody use, like, I'm thinking the Lumen breath tool, or maybe tracking and something like on MyFitnessPal? Does somebody need to do that in order to optimize this?
I think when you bring in tools like MyFitnessPal, at least, there's a different conversation when it's like, I need to put on muscle mass or I want to lose weight versus I want to optimize my energy.
Yeah, I want to keep it like, we're not losing weight here. We're paying attention to how do we get the biggest return on investment of our brain health. And so we keep, because there's so much diet, exercise, weight loss, mumbo jumbo out there that I think we can get really overwhelmed. But if we just keep it in, how do I get the most energy so then the best business owner that I can possibly be, and forget about like losing weight or gaining weight?
There's 3 things that I teach as a components. Number 1 is it's how stable is your blood sugar? Because if you're on the roller coaster, your energy is going to be on the roller coaster, and hence goes your focus. So that's kind of what we talked about with like finding how to titrate carbs in. What's best for you? 2 is going to be looking for like inflammatory seed oils. And if you haven't heard of that before, if you flip over almost anything in a jar, in a can, you'll see canola oil on it, or vegetable oil, or
it's really disturbing.
Yeah, well, these fats are not high quality, and your brain cells are made of fats. And if you want your brain cells to communicate effectively, you don't want these. And this is not to say that they don't ever show up in any foods, but like if you're like cooking in canola oil, or these are easy ones to eliminate, or if you're like, can you switch to a salad dressing that doesn't have it? Like there are really easy ways we can just start looking for that. And the last one, what I like to look at is if our gut is inflamed. And how do you tell that? So if you eat a meal and within 2 to 3 hours after, you're foggy, you're tired, you're hungry, you're cranky, your joints hurt, you have a headache, you have a stomach ache, there's a high chance that something in what you ate is creating inflammation in your body. And there is a nerve that connects your brain and your gut. So if you have inflammation in your gut, you're likely going to have an effect on your thinking. So I always just like to look, and one of those for me, funny thing, was broccoli. And this is why I think we need to do this ourselves. So when I eat broccoli, I get this hollow, starving sensation right after. And that's not normal after a full meal. And so I'm like, this is something's going on here. Quinoa's the same way for me, actually. And so I think it's really like, ask yourself after your next meal, like, how do I feel? If you're not light, content, and satisfied, maybe try eliminating it. And to go back, I guess, to your original question of like, how can we measure it, right? So a lot of these devices, Whoop does it, Aura does it, they give you something called your heart rate variability. It is a metric that tells you if your body is in fight or flight or not. So here's what I look for with the way I am eating. I want a very stable heart rate variability. It might go up a little and down a little, but it's very stable. That is ideal. If I, let's say I'm sensitive to dairy and I pull dairy out, if my heart rate variability goes up, I'm adapting well to this. There's something I need to pay attention to. On the flip side, if I go on a week of eating pizza, alcohol, fried foods, whatever like that, and I notice a drop in my heart rate variability, that is a direct metric. That is a measure of fight or flight and inflammation. So I use that metric to monitor like food changes long-term. Am I adapting well? So that's kind of a fun one.
Thank you for sharing that. And in the Whoop, there's a diary. So that's the one thing I liked on the Whoop over the Aura Ring, was that you could keep track, like how close to bedtime did you eat or what did you eat? So gotta find out what's right for you. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this whole comparison game that people play and getting on the train, right? So maybe it's the keto train, high fat, low carb train. How do we stay off those bandwagons and stay in our zone, right? Because if you jump on the keto train, but you feel sluggish and you just keep on telling yourself, well, it'll get better. but you are actually losing productivity because you're trying to do what everyone else is doing right now. How do you like just let go of all of the noise around you and really just pay attention to your brain health?
Well, I think that's where some of these devices actually come in, is you get that direct feedback, right? But beyond that, I would just tap into your thinking. What is it, that sentence that you're telling yourself about why you think that will work? Because at the end of the day, I come back to really simple principle. It's, did it come from the ground or did it have a mother? Whole foods. Like, it does not matter what diet you choose. They all come back to the same thing. It's whole foods, real foods. And I think like so many of us, like even if we just shifted to that principle, no matter whether it meant like you were eating more vegetables or more protein or less, whatever it might be, I think we could all benefit from just really shifting to that and seeing how we feel. And I think using that as a gauge, right? Because we know what worked for someone else won't work for us. But I think it's really looking at the return on investment of what we're doing, like putting in the effort to see, is this actually working? And then if it is or it isn't, what do I want to keep? What do I want to change? And what am I doing differently next week? And I think we don't ever do that evaluation, because let's say you do try keto and you do feel sluggish about it, but maybe breakfasts were super easy, but the whole thing as a whole didn't work. So instead of just saying that didn't work, it's like, well, I liked the breakfast, but it didn't work for the rest of the day. So what if I kept breakfast and changed the other ones? What would that look like? And so I think that's a kind of a neat way to look at it, as more of a holistic perspective, instead of just chucking out one idea and jumping to a new idea. It's like, what is working from all of these that works best for me? What makes me stick to it?
Yeah, just the same way that entrepreneurs need to take that time on a monthly basis to review their numbers. We need to review what's working and what's not working, right? Like I say that repeatedly on the show, what's working, what's not working in the context of our numbers and operating our business. But that goes to the same of operating our bodies and our brains, what's working, what's not working. One last kind of like tactical question, and it is caffeine. I have heard so much about caffeine, and I think if you were to ask most people, they would call caffeine that kind of their cup of coffee in the morning was their limitless pill, but that comes with crashes. Is it good for us? Should we drink it? Do we need to let it go? What's your stance on that?
I have two guidelines for caffeine, because I drink coffee, and I think it's like, it goes back to anything. It's about smart coffee versus no coffee or yes coffee. So in general, my rule of thumb is I like to keep it at least 12 hours wrap up from bedtime. So if you go to bed at 10, wrap up by 10 a.m. That means it will not be affecting sleep. So you may not feel like you need as much caffeine the next day if you're getting good sleep. Part one. Part two, and I love this, and it has an immediate benefit. You will see it the same day. Most people get up, eyes aren't even open yet, and they're at the coffee machine, right? So the problem with this is when you have caffeine early in the morning, it competes for a binding site in your brain that this sleepy chemical also occupies. So when you have caffeine first thing in the morning, your brain actually doesn't get to clear out all of that sleepy chemical. So it just kind of stays there waiting. And when the caffeine wears off, that sleepy chemical goes like, I'm still here. And then we get a crash in the afternoon. The simplest thing you can do, and I say simple, not easy, but you can do it. It's if you can wait 90 minutes to 2 hours after you wake up to have that cup of coffee, that afternoon energy crash that you're experiencing where you'll lose the focus, I guarantee you it will be at least half. I've had many clients who have found it wiped out completely just by not having caffeine when they wake up. Simple.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I think you just broke a lot of hearts.
But you know what? So the thing that I've been doing to replace that, because I did find at the beginning, first of all, if 90 minutes sounds scary, go back 15 minutes a day, go slow. I found the biggest thing though was like, what do I do with my hands in the morning? Like it was such a thing that if you want to like compound like a 1-2 health habit there, if you have 16 ounces of water while you're waiting, it'll give you something to do with your hands. You're still drinking, and then you go into your day more hydrated. So that's also going to help your brain.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what it's like to work with you. How do you work with your clients, and what is kind of the outcome? What's the transformation that they normally see?
So the first thing I always love to work on is sleep. We need to make sure that we're going into our day feeling energized and focused. So after sleep is mastered and we go through food and we go through what I like to actually call resilience, meaning exercise is incorporated in there, saunas, cold showers, all of that. It's like, how are we building our capacity to tolerate the stresses of our business? So the goal is by the end of this, that we are able to wake up in the morning and we have the strategies to create the energy that we need to get through our day and then still have a life inside a life. And what I mean by that is after you clock out for the day, do you have the energy to actually hang out with your kids? Do you have the energy to go on walks, get your workouts done, do that fun around the house project? Or do you feel like you just need to zone out and watch Netflix? Nothing against Netflix, but is there anything that you feel would bring more value to your life that you're not able to do because you're so tired? So that's one of those things. And like a good example of that is that a client messaged me this week and she says, I have never felt so good on a Monday ever. That is all. That was what she said to me in a message. And I think that true thing is when we really realize that this is the way our body is supposed to feel. And I didn't realize I was supposed to feel this good. I think that's one of those benefits from health that once you experience it, it gets so easy to begin sticking to it because you just don't want to give up that feeling. And it's just so good. So I do that via obviously one-on-one coaching. And then actually this summer, we're bringing in a community. So we're bringing entrepreneurs together who find this valuable and want to run businesses from a place of health and leadership and being the energized person that they want to be. So bringing that into a community group aspect, it'll be something that I'm bringing in this summer.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on that one that launches. I told you before we hit record, this is kind of passion number 2 for me. Numbers is always number 1, but passion number 2 is just how do we feel our best? I watch kind of our aging parents and aging friends, and we're all aging. I don't want that to turn into an excuse of we're supposed to feel run down now, because we're not. We're not.
And because everyone else is, and it must be normal.
Yeah, it's not normal. And we're not supposed to be run down. I feel better. My husband and I were just talking about it yesterday. We did 75-day hard challenge, and then we extended it for another 90 days after that. So we're like halfway through that. We were sitting there talking yesterday that we feel better now than we did 10 years ago. And so don't dismiss this stuff. It's not, these little habits and these little things are what makes you a better leader, gives you more energy, and allows you to grow your business.
Yeah, I love what you just said. It's funny. My husband had that same conversation the other day. It's just like when you're in that place where you feel good in your body and your mind and your energy, I looked at him and I was like, if life never got any better than this, it'd be amazing. Like just being able to feel good in your life, like whether the business continues to grow or this is, it's just, it makes you stop chasing more for the purpose of more and being like, if that happens, that's great, but this is good where it is. And I find that is just something that is priceless.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. How do listeners connect with you, learn more about you, and potentially work with you?
Yeah. So if you're loving the sleep stuff and you want to improve on that, I have a free 3-part training called 3 Biohacking Secrets to Optimize Your Energy and Your Focus. And that's at tanessashears.com/biohacking. You'll learn all the ins and outs of circadian rhythms, how to apply it. So more of the tactical of like this, then this, then this of what we went through today. But otherwise than that, I have a podcast called Becoming Limitless. And every single episode is a deep dive into one of these strategies, why it works, how to implement it, and how it affects your business. So if you're just like, give me something to work on this week, pick any episode. I guarantee you'll find something that you can incorporate to make you feel better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.